Hey everyone, welcome to the Authority Hacker podcast. In this episode, we are going to be talking about picking the right domain name for your business. We are also going to be talking about advanced problems like dealing with trademark issues. We're going to be talking about expired domains and how to deal with usually the fact that they are pretty bad in terms of branding. We're going to be talking about TLDs, we're talking about DNS performance and a bunch of other stuff. So it's not just a beginner's episode. We are going to be covering lots and lots of grounds here. It's going to be exciting. There's a lot of funny stories in this episode as well. So let's get started with the episode. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Authority Hacker podcast. As you can see from my haircut and the poor batteries in the Flamingo behind me, I haven't been recording these videos lately, so I need to rework on my setup. But I am back on the podcast after Mark took it away for 1 week with Steve Todd. It was a good interview, so check it out if you haven't. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about what seems to be a beginner's topic, which is going to be picking your domain name. But we're also going to be talking about some advanced stuff here. We're going to talk about like the DNS that is provided with registrars. We're going to be talking about trademarks and issues you might have with that. We're going to share some tools, etc. So it's going to be interesting, even if you already have a domain name. We're going to talk about rebranding as well, this kind of stuff. So it's going to be quite interesting. And I'm not going to tease you anymore. I'm going to introduce today's he's smiling already. I see it. Like I'm gonna. Like, it's like I was like, how do I introduce that? And then you just like, I see you just can't wait on the camera. So I'm not going to even make some shitty transition. I'm gonna say, how's it going, Mark? You know?
It's going good, thanks, Gail. I asked Steve that last week, and I kind of had a smirk in my mind when I was doing it. But when it's funny. You asked me this probably for the last 3 years, every single podcast. But
yeah.
I always fail to prepare. Maybe one out of 10 times I have a good answer. So I think we need to make a bigger section in the podcast notes for this. So I remember.
That's the main reason people listen to this podcast, right? It's like there's many competing SEO podcasts that get much less downloads than us, and I think that is the one USP is that asking you how you're doing. No, but like okay. Let's get into today's topic. I just wanted to note that your background is getting more and more plain, but congratulations on the.
So yeah, just an update on the renovation. We've got shelves have been ordered, acoustic panels have been ordered, and once they're installed, it's still going to look super plain because you won't see the acoustic panels. But once they're installed and we see the position of the shelves, because there's a door that opens there as well. Then we can start doing some of the more colorful.
So by the time you have a background, I won't have one because I'm moving out, right? So it should be around that time. Okay, makes sense. Let's get started with today's podcast. Let's talk about picking a domain. It is a pretty important thing in terms of starting your website, and it's going to. I feel it just affects a lot of things, like at a small percentage, and eventually it just becomes something that can. Make or break your site if you do it really wrong. If you do it like kind of wrong, usually you can kind of get away with it. If you do it really wrong, it's a problem. So I mean, one of the things that it does is it's the initial impression of your site. So like when people are Googling keywords, you might be trying to rank on Google, but if your domain name is shit, like Google shows the domain name in the search results, right? And if it's just not trustworthy and it looks scammy usually, like your click-through is going to be significantly lower. So like spending some time doing your branding properly will affect your search click-through rate, which means that this extra day you might spend brainstorming the right domain name will end up getting you thousands and thousands and thousands of extra clicks over the life of your website just for that one reason, right? Just for that CTR reason in Google. But there's more to that. There's also
another reason that sort of like plays off of that is in link building as well. If you introduce your link building outreach as, "Hi, I'm Mark from cheap-iphones.info," people are already, without even clicking on your site, making a judgment about it. And
I'm not sure that info domains are still a thing though. When was the last time you saw one?
I mean, you can still register them, is what I'm saying. You shouldn't. But they do still exist. But it's been a while since I've seen so many on the SERP. And maybe this is why, because nobody wants to link to them because they're associated as being super spammy.
It's the evolution theory being validated in front of us, It's like they existed and slowly they don't adapt to the environment, so they disappear, So it's a good old Darwinism. Anyway, yeah, it matters for that. It also matters if you have some kind of related keywords in your domain name. So like, exact match domains were a thing. And it's like, I don't see nearly as many of them ranking as we used to several years ago. But like, what it does when you have keywords that are somewhat related, I'm not saying one keyword you're targeting, like no site targets one keyword anymore. It's a shitty SEO strategy to do that anyway. But having like keywords that are somewhat related to what you do in your domain name, what it does is that every time there's a naked anchor text or URL anchor text, it puts your keywords in your anchor text, which increases relevancy. And it does matter a little bit. It's like, you can rank sites that don't have on domains that don't have your keywords. That's not what I'm saying, but you do get a tiny bit of a competitive advantage if you do that. So usually getting a domain name that illustrates what you do, which is good practice in general for people to click on search, is also something that might affect the bots of Google that will give you extra relevancy and end up ranking a little bit higher for everything. So you might rank a little bit higher, you might get a bit more click-through rate, and you might get a bit more links. So that's what it does to get a good domain, and that's why we think that we should cover that. And I was actually surprised to look into at least on YouTube, we haven't covered that topic yet at all. So I think it's a good thing to do. So before we jump into tips and tricks and questions many people have, I thought we should do a section on things to avoid when picking a domain name, because I think picking a good domain name is much more about avoiding mistakes than it is about there's no right answer. There's no like perfect answer. It's not a math problem. So as long as your domain is somewhat related to what you do and you don't make the mistakes we're going to be talking about just now, you should be in good shape. And I think the first one is using hyphens. There are still domains with hyphens, and you find a domain with hyphens that ranks high, but I challenge you to Google competitive keywords and find lots of domains with hyphens. Usually they are the spammy ones that are like, here for 3 months and then gone after that, don't really make it past the updates, etc. Not because they have hyphens, but usually because they're run by people who just don't care as much about the website and therefore don't, do as good of a job on it.
There's a few things going on there. So what you mentioned is correct, but there's also some small subtleties. For example, if I'm chatting to you in person and I say, I was on this really good website, authority-hacker.com. It's like, or I'm not really going to say that. I'll just say, it was Authority Hacker. Well, we have it, I think.
Oh, really?
If not, then I'm going to go buy it before the podcast goes out, just in case someone registers it.
We'll
talk more about cyber squatters and that later. But if you have a hyphen domain, it also means that there's a high chance someone else has the unhyphenated version. Even if it's not used at the moment, it could be used later, and it can cause all sorts of issues when two companies start having very similar domain names.
Yeah, I agree. It's like it cannot be spoken as well. So, I mean, not many people necessarily do that, but like on this podcast, for example, it's very annoying if we're trying to like share a domain with a hyphen, for example, and making it spoken, like people will mistype more often, will do all of that. You're going to lose traffic. And usually the people who are trying to type your domain, they're the best kind of traffic. They're the traffic that will convert, that will click on your links and make you money, etc. So it's quite important. Obviously, if you are doing a pure SEO game, not really trying to build a brand, it's not as big of a deal. And I see why some people doing like pure, but like, rank and tank, basically, let's just call it that, the game, then that can be okay. But in general, if you're trying to build something long term, I would avoid these.
There's a higher chance as well that you might start getting into a case where the brand name or the name is actually trademarked elsewhere. If the .coms is used and it's used by a company doing anything, then in many cases they will own the trademark. So you going in and getting the hyphenated version, they can come and there's a process to sort of, it costs a bit of money, but to wrestle that domain out of you if they own a legit trademark for it. So you can open yourself up to all sorts of issues there where you may end up having to move domain to something completely different for further down the line. And it's something you should do anyway, whether you have hyphen or not, is run a search on the to see if anyone else has a trademark for it.
How do you do that?
So there's each country in the world has its own trademark database. It's not really realistic to search for all of them. So if you just search through the US and through the European ones, they have search functionality. We'll put links to that in the video or in the description. And then just see if anyone else has a trademark or similar trademarks. Be aware that the plural of a trademark still counts against the singular. So we have a trademark, authorityhacker.com. If someone registers authorityhackers.com, plural, we still own a trademark and it's covered under that. Someone actually did that, and we've kind of got into it with them for a little bit, and eventually they just sort of gave it up, and we were able to register that. However, it can be a bit expensive. It's maybe a few
How do you
thousand.
enforce it as well? Like let's say someone takes your domain. Like, what do I do?
So first things first is you send them a cease and desist. You tell them what they're doing and just make them aware, because quite often it's the case that they're just not aware of the legal rules, or that you're using it, or that you have the trademark or anything. If they're, a lot of the time they're going to be okay, fine, here you go. If they're still like, no, fuck you, or they don't respond, then there is a process. It's called a UDRP, Universal Domain Name Resolution Process. And basically every domain registrar that's set up has signed up to this. And it's a process where you have to pay a few $1,000s, and there's some judges, like a panel of judges, will sit and kind of decide whether your trademark is legit and what should happen. And there's a whole process to go through. It's not cheap. It's a few $1,000s before legal fees. So you're looking at maybe $5,000 or something. To some big companies, that's nothing.
Yeah, they'll do it.
Though they have teams of lawyers, armies of lawyers ready to come after you if you do anything like this. And so you just don't want to have that hassle. So it's very important to.
It happened to Perrin actually. When he started his dog site, he named it chewysays.com because his dog was called Chewy. Except chewy.com is also one of the biggest pet stores online. Unfortunate. And they did all of that, and he had to hand over the domain. So it does happen. So be a little careful of that. I know a lot of people are gonna roll their eyes and be annoyed, etc. But the problem is usually these enforcements don't happen as you're starting your site. They happen a year later, a year and a half later. You've invested lots of time and money and energy into link building your domain, all that. The content and the site, you can kind of move to another domain. They don't care about that. But the links, you will lose. So any links that you have built to that domain, they're gone. You have to hand them over pretty much. So just be a little careful, because it could cost you a lot, and it's not very frequent, but when it happens, you're gonna cry. You're gonna be annoyed, and there's a big chance you will probably just give up on the site, to be honest.
There are cases when the domain is used in another context. And it's kind of allowed. So for example, Nissan.com.
I know this one.
Is probably the most famous. Nissan's obviously a world famous car company. They don't own Nissan.com. It's owned by a small computer, computing, a computer repair company, I think, somewhere in the US. And they still have the domain, and they fought against the countless lawsuits from Nissan, the car company, over this. But they've even admitted this has totally not been worth it. There's so much stress, and it's cost them so much to defend themselves. And even though they still have it, it's a nightmare. So stay well clear of these situations.
Yeah. Another thing to avoid is having too many words in your domain, or having a too long domain name. First of all, when you again, I'm just gonna talk purely from a search perspective, so that people, because I know people care mostly about that. You have a number of pixels allowed to your URL in the SERPs. And so if your domain name, your base domain name takes a lot of space, then people won't see what the URL is. It's just going to be truncated. And you are less likely to get clicks. Anything that gets truncated on Google gets less clicks for it. We've done all these CTR studies and all of that, etc. It just gets worse. So in general, having a shorter one is better. For spoken language is also better. Again, if I mention a domain name with 5 words right now, it's going to be complicated for you guys to go on there. there's more opportunities for typos in the domain name, therefore broken links, etc. are going to happen more often. And in general, just bad practice, like doing a logo on top of your site is going to be a nightmare. It's going to look weird. Like lots and lots of things that just get worse with long domain names.
Also, on that point, when you look at a domain in your SERP and the SERP or in the sort of URL bar at the top of your browser, there's no spaces, right? So authority hacker, 2 words. It's pretty obvious when you read it. Your eyes like will identify those 2 words. But if there's 5 words in there, 6 words in there, it gets harder and harder to actually see what is the domain name here. Like you have to like really pay attention and read it closely, and that can count against you. Just even if the words are fine together, but they can also cause situations where different sets of words look differently if the space is in different spaces. So there's a few good examples I dug up. Teacherstalking.com can also be read as teacherstalking.com.
Much more interesting.
PowerGen, which is a energy company, they set up their website in Italy, powergenitalia.com, which reads powergenitalia.com.
Yeah, I didn't even realize what it was.
And then there's an island in the US called Penn Island, which is Penis Island. I think penisisland.net was their website. Don't go to that domain just in case it's something else. And my all-time favorite was I was searching for my own name once just to see. I think I was looking for Harrows or something, and I just went to google.co.uk and put in Mark Webster, and this guy's who was like a physiotherapist for sports teams came up. And his website, his name is Mark Webster, and his website was marktherapistwebster.co.uk or .com. What's wrong with that, you say? Well, therapist, if there's no space in between, or if there's a space in between, can also be read as the rapist. So it was marktherapistwebster.co.uk, which was just, I mean, I don't know how he didn't see that one. I believe he's
not
since
live. Yeah, I don't see.
Yeah, he's since changed it. We'll have to look up Wayback Machine for to see if that's been used previously.
So now it's just a matter of time before someone picks it up to do a PBN on it with your face.
Oh God! Yeah.
Good job bringing it up. Let's see what people decide to do with this.
And in a similar sort of sphere, maybe sort of less bad, but still an issue, is when words can sound the same but are spelled differently. So a good example is our previous agency was called HireClick, HIGHER Click. Can't tell you the number of times I was on the phone to someone and they telling them my email address or whatever, and they thought it was Hire, HIRE, which is pronounced almost exactly the same. Another good example for that is our friend Johnny Ward. He runs a pretty big travel blog actually, and his website is one step for the number Ward instead of forward. So it's kind of a play on that. But every time he says it, or someone says, "Oh, have you seen one step forward?" It causes issues. So just think about those as well.
I think it's a smart play on Word, but it actually probably loses him lots of traffic. Because he's that guy where people would like type the domain name actually, so it's a bit of a mistake on that, and probably he should buy onestepforward.com and just redirect. So we tend to do that, and actually it's something that something I'm bringing up now. I have like a list of questions we should talk about later, but it's one of those. Like, should you buy variations of your domain, etc.? If you are branded, if people are likely, like if you're doing a podcast like we do, or if you're showing your face, and if you're doing YouTube, if you're doing that stuff, yes, you should do that. And you should buy all the typos, variations, etc., and redirect. So I don't know how many domains we are maintaining right now. For Authority Hacker, for example, but at least a dozen or something, like Authority Hackers with an S, and a bunch of others basically. So it's
and let me just clarify, like if you're watching and you have like a big site, a semi-big site, or it's growing, stop and go and buy all those domains now. It's $100 a year, but it's so worth it in terms of the hassle, because you'll get all sorts of people registering the .net, the .org, .in, .co.uk, with a hyphen, with a plural. Like, just go and buy them all. Like, I know it's.
Should you buy like absolutely every country, or like do you leave some out?
No, so I mean, we did. I think UK, India, .eu, maybe .ca, and I think .au, the Australian one.
It's hard to buy.
You need you can't buy that one.
Yeah.
So we didn't have that. But if you buy it for Authority Hacker, we'll come after you. So don't do it. And you know, we've had people for some of our product names, like the Authority Site System. I think someone registered the authoritysitesystem.com once, and they were an affiliate and they were trying to like rank for it. So we just like, okay, we'll just cut you out of the affiliate program. And they're like, oh no, don't do that. So we got the domain off them. But I mean, people try all sorts of like tricks like this, and it's not cool.
You don't need to be that big of a company for this to happen to you as well. I think a lot of people expect, like, it's like Authority Hacker is like okay, but it's not a big company. It's like just some dudes talking on YouTube, you know.
If you want to take it to the most extreme, I actually know the guy who owned Facebook.net in the early days, and he sold it to Facebook, to Mark Zuckerberg, and he got a really high amount of money for it, but he didn't take the money. He took pre-IPO Facebook shares as well. So probably one of the best, probably one of the best, I wouldn't call it cyber squatting, but it kind of is, deals of all time. From his end at least.
But like, here's my question then: if you buy one of the, let's say if I dig around, I guarantee you I can find variations that are not bought by companies.
Yeah.
Are they gonna pay me for it, or they're just gonna force me to hand it for free?
Most of the time, no. I mean, there's not too much you can do with it. The issue with Authority Hacker is there were actually quite a few, because there's two of us. There's quite a few people that think we're Authority hackers and still call us the Authority Hackers. And the people even link, there were if you put Ahrefs, there were links to authorityhackers.com, so people just assumed that was it. So it was more of a problem in that case. It was worse though in this guy's case, because he carbon copied the Authority Hacker site, and then so like our logo was there, photos, brand, all it was color, all the colors, everything, and linked to another, like his own affiliate marketing course, and it was just like, you know, that's textbook like trademark abuse right there. So
yeah, didn't I don't think he made that many sales or anything. Like, I think people saw, because you would click it wasn't us, it was like some other dude. Okay, anything else on the last one I wanted to give as a tip, things to avoid, is to buy the domain immediately if you found a free, I'm talking more in the case of like you found a $10.com domain, right? If you found like an expired domain or something and it's a good opportunity and the auction is finishing in 2 hours, buy it. But if you know, very often I like to brainstorm, like, you know, like when we start a new Authority Site System course or a site, sorry, I buy a $10 domain, right? I don't buy an expired domain. I don't do any of that. Maybe next time I'll change. We'll see. And I tell people to wait 24 hours and to talk to someone about it, because very often there's like things we don't see in the domains, or like we sleep on it and then we change our mind or something like that. And actually in the last version of the Authority Site System, I buy a domain in the video, and then I didn't follow my own advice. And the next day I come back to record the rest of the training, and I'm like, you know what? I like this other variation of the domain that I found better. And so I changed the domain name. So my recommendation, if the .com is available still today, it's probably going to be available tomorrow. So give it 24 hours. Actually, it's a good tip for anything you want to buy in general. Like, don't buy things immediately. Just give it 24 hours or 48 hours or something like this. And very often you don't want to buy them anymore.
However, be very careful if you're asking people for advice, especially in any kind of public forum. Like, hey, what do you guys think of this domain? Because people will just go out and buy it and, like, you know, cyber squat on you. Right there.
Yeah, someone did that to us.
One of our friends did that to us as well.
Fucking asshole. Like, seriously. It's like we brainstormed the domain name for a new site. He's like, this domain. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty good. He's like, too late, I bought it. Like, fuck you. So, yeah, good times. Now he's a CEO of a $1 billion company, so, you know.
Not because of this, but
not because of that domain. No, it's something else. Anyway, while we're talking about buying domains, I'm going to give you guys a good tool that you can use that I find is decent. Like actually the tool I used to use just doesn't work anymore. I actually need to change the link in tests. But businessnamegenerator.com is pretty cool. Like you can put a seed keyword, and it's going to find a bunch of variations with domains that are available or not available. So I mean, obviously it's hard to find a .com, and actually let's talk about the TLD where we're at it as well. Usually you probably do want to buy a .com domain 99.9% of the time. I think the time where I wouldn't do it is when you're running something more local. Like let's say your plan is to do like a shop in the UK, for example, I'll buy a .co.uk, because the TLD is actually a huge ranking factor in the market where you want to go. You can rank a .com in the UK, for example. There is an option in Webmaster's Console to target your domain just to a geographical area. But from my test that were a while ago, so I'm putting a little bit of a disclaimer here, the TLD of the country was stronger than having a .com set up in Webmaster's Console. So in general, that's when I would pick that. Otherwise, I would 99.9% pick a .com, unless maybe there's like a really, really good expired domain.
You'd probably want to buy both the .com and the .co.uk.
Yeah, but like
if they're available.
No, there's one exception, which is if I started on an expired domain with the intention to rebrand later, and we'll talk about this a bit after, then I'd be happy to take another TLD for the beginning.
I would also say the other TLD, maybe the only other TLD that I would consider aside from .com and your local geographic one is .io. If you're a software company, it's not the best. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but it's often seen as quite legit. A lot of startup companies, a lot of software companies are using it, and I think it's fine. Certainly compared to .info or a random .tld, like .travel.
I don't mind
or something
.net
like that.
as much. Like there's a few companies on .net. It's not great. It's much worse than .com, but there's a few companies on .net actually. Like I'd say it's like the runner-up.
Who do you know is on .net?
I can't remember. I was thinking about it now, but I've seen a few. But
because
like,
I remember ProBlogger used to have ProBlogger.net, but they're .com now.
Yeah, of course, it's still better.
It.
Like if you're a big company, like it's still better, but you can start on .net. Lead pages started on .net, for example.
In all these cases, they ended up having to pay quite a bit of money to acquire the .com thing. So maybe it's fine when you're a bigger company, but yeah, if you can avoid it, you probably should.
Yeah, Noah Kagan started on sumo.net, I think, or sumo.net.
No, he didn't. They just had appsumo.com, and then they wanted the sumo.com, and they paid $3 million for it or something.
There was because AppSumo is still AppSumo.
But they wanted Sumo for like their group name.
No. Sumo was the pop-up tool. Like they had this free WordPress plugin with like contact forms pop-up. It's still there. If you go on sumo.com, you will see. So it's like an email capture tool that they were running for free for a long time. That was very popular. But it was something else. It was another name, like Sumo something. And they wanted, and so because they wanted that sumo.com, they paid $1 million for that sumo.com domain name. Actually, it's public. Like he shared that publicly. So I don't mind mentioning that. But yeah, it's like it can cost a lot of money if you. Sometimes it's better to just brainstorm early and then and save that money later. But yeah, it's like that especially because that was not that popular anymore. It's a bit of a shame to spend this much money on a domain name, I believe. But yeah, that happens, and that is usually either ego. A lot of people have a lot of ego around the domain name. They do want like the shortest TLD. Like that's a 4-letter pronounceable name that means something. Yeah, it's valuable. Like it would resell for quite a bit of money. But it's like a lot of people that I've seen spend a lot of money on domains like that. It's people with big egos as well. So I'm just gonna.
And you can usually avoid it by just spending a few more hours brainstorming.
Yeah,
like it's hard.
It can be very valuable hours.
Usually in the first hour or two, you're doing this. It can feel like everything's taken, but I promise you, just work at it a little bit longer, and there really are a lot of good domain names available still.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, I had this question in my question list, like what to do if a domain name is already taken that I want to take. I mean, very often if the domain name is not exploited, so there's no website on it, it's going to have a page that tells you that it's for sale or something, or you can make an offer or something like this. Usually that offer is going to be in a 4 or 5 figures range most of the time, like for 2 or 3 words. for 2 or 3 hours domains. I would expect something, between $3,000 and $40,000, let's say, something like this.
I got in touch with the people that had Mark Webster just to see how much it would be. And they wanted, I think, like $27,000 for it or something like that. I obviously didn't buy it. No, obviously, but that gives you an idea of like how much these kind of domains go for, and that's two words. If it's one word, it can be
I'm gonna buy gailbreton.com after this podcast because it's actually free, $8.98. So yeah, probably it will be registered by the time the podcast goes live, so I don't mind, but probably should buy that. Who knows? Yeah. How do you do an email when you have your name as the domain? It's like Gail@Gailbreton. That's kind of like, it's too much ego here for me, like hello, maybe something like that. I don't know. It's not my favorite. Just keep your Gmail. Anyway, the next one I had was, should you register your domain name with your hosting or on a separate registrar? Which it's an interesting question as well, especially for newbies, because most of the time when you buy cheap hosting, they kind of like sell you the domain with it. And very often they give you the domain for free. Why? Because they put you on a subscription for like, I think SiteGround charges you like $20 per year for your domain after the first year. So they give you the first year for free, then they charge you $20. But really, a .com domain costs about $9 per year to maintain on a normal registrar. So they kind of like make their money later.
What's the best registrar to use?
Now I use Cloudflare actually. And so yeah, but like to go back to the original question, if you're a beginner and you don't want to deal with tech, your first year you can absolutely register with your registrar, because if you're
with your registrar or with your hosting company,
with your hosting company, I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's fine. Basically, it's not going to do a big difference, and you can transfer it out. Just make sure you can transfer it out later, and you can move it to a registrar later. If they overcharge you for your domain, you can move out. It's an easy, simple setup for people who don't want to deal with it. If you're a little bit more advanced, and you don't need to be that advanced really, you can go on a separate registrar. I use Cloudflare now because it's our DNS of choice, and we're going to talk about DNS in a second. But Namecheap is pretty good too. So it's a good idea to split it as well, because if you change hosting later, then you don't need to move your domain as well when you're doing this. You can just you can keep your domain on the registrar and move your hosting, and you only have one thing to change, not two things, and it's a lot less of a headache. So my recommendation is to split it eventually. Cloudflare is actually doing it at cost now, so it's really cool. Now, when you use a registrar, you get a DNS. So DNS is short for domain name server. That's basically what ties the domain name that you have, so the string of letters that your domain name is, to the IP of the server where the website is hosted. So it just connects the domain name to the files of the website so that it loads when people put the address. And so this DNS resolution, the servers that do that, they matter for your site performance, for your site speed actually. And there is a website called Dnsperf.com that does real-time testing of DNS to see which ones resolve the fastest. And actually, Cloudflare, which is free, is number 3 in the world, actually. And they're not by much. I think they have like 1.2 millisecond difference from the number 1. So it's really good, and you can get a free hosting. Like you can either register your domains on Cloudflare, or you can use the DNS even if you're on a separate registrar, or you can even use their DNS if you are on like Siteground, for example, which we use. I teach that in the site system as well. I show people how to put their DNS on Cloudflare because it matters for site speed, and very often registrars have terrible DNS performance, and that it's not like going to make you pass Core Web Vitals to do that, but it's going to matter a little bit for a resolution for each file. So if it's free, you might as well use that. So yeah, that's one tip that I wanted to share. I wanted to put more questions after as well. Like I wanted to put ourselves in the shoes of someone who might have started a website on a bad domain name, right? So what do you do if like you started your website 6 months ago, you've built 50 links to your site, and you start on a bad domain name? Would you start over, Mark?
Only if it was if there was like a real trademark threat, because okay, you built 50 links, but you know you go build another 150 this year, and then you might get taken away next year. So I would, in that specific case, I would register a different domain, and then I would 301 your current domain, as you would do with any website migration. But the fact that it's 301 may not definitely, but may make it less of a there'd be less of a chance, because because they're not going to find you as easily.
Yeah, they need to really type it, because like even Google's just going to show the site you redirect to and so on. So yeah, I mean in general, yeah, it's like I would, if it's really bad, I would rebrand right away, but rebrand with redirect. If it's not really bad, probably just keep going. It's probably keep going and rebrand at some point. But like maybe just you want to sync the name change with like a full redesign or something like this. Like you kind of want to make it kind of like the next step of the company, something like this. So like it doesn't always have to be immediately right now, you know?
There's something we didn't really touch on that's kind of relevant here as well. If you buy a $10 off-the-shelf domain name, it's worth checking whether that domain name has been used previously for something else. Because there can be a lot of risks there. For example, if it has a dodgy link profile, maybe it was used as a spammy PBN in the past and
checking galbreton.com now.
And all sorts of issues like that. So if you put it in archive.org in the Wayback Machine, see what it was used for before, that gives you an idea. You put it in Ahrefs as well to find out, has it had traffic before, has it had links before, are those links good? I just do like a very basic audit of things before you acquire it, as you would with any expired domain, really, and you can kind of avoid any potential pitfalls there as well.
Well, I actually made a blog comment in 2012 that links to galbreton.com because I had to put a URL in the comments. So this domain has one link. So I basically am going to rank for everything. But yeah, do check that. Archive.org, Ahrefs. Yeah, make sure there's no spammy history on the domain. Usually, I mean, look, if the domain has been not used for many years, I do believe that Google does have some kind of reset going on eventually. So if you really, really, really want, you can take that risk, but know that there is a tiny risk that it wasn't resetted, and the spam history will matter. And the thing as well is like, there's lots of like spam lists of like spammy domains, etc. that are used, for example, by email providers. So if you start sending emails from your site, etc., like it might become an issue even if Google doesn't care that much about it. So it's a little bit dodgy to use a domain that has done bad stuff in the past. It is a risk. Probably better brainstorm something else, but if it's been like dead for a long, long time, it might be worth the risk if the branding is really good, I would say. So yeah, that's pretty much that. Same if you want to, I put if you want to buy a site on a bad domain name. So if you want to buy a site on a bad domain name, same thing. Consider rebranding. Usually that's kind of like, you know, if I was buying a site, I'd probably want to, usually I hate the tech, the way it's built, so I would probably rebuild it and rebrand at the same time while keeping all the URLs of the pages so that I can maintain the rankings. So do that, and it might give you a nice boost, or yeah, that's what I would do basically.
It's another reason here why it's important to pick a good domain name, because it can affect the sales price. Right? If there's a trademark issue, trademark threat there, you may not even be able to sell it in some cases. So yeah, you have to be really careful.
Yeah, I agree. It's dangerous. It's hard to exit. You put something about premium domains?
Yeah, so I guess this is the same point before, where sometimes you search for a domain name and it's available on GoDaddy or whoever, but it's rather than $10, it's $1,000 or $2,000. I'm not sure exactly how they decide what these are. Sometimes I think they can be domains that were used previously for something else, but sometimes they're just like shorter, good, often two-word names. And yeah, it's just $1,000 for the first year, or just to buy it, and then it's just $10 a month. Normally, for like a beginner especially, I really wouldn't recommend doing this. We've done it once, and we never did anything with the site. in the end, so probably wasn't worth it.
I
We
remember
may
which site it was.
it was the finance one.
Oh, okay.
And we haven't done
Really?
anything with it yet, but we may at some point.
Okay.
Yeah, don't you remember? It was like
No.
the end of the tax year, and it was like, oh, this is available. We should do something with it.
I don't remember, but that sounds like a terrible idea, like many of our ideas.
Yeah.
But anyway, but thank you.
We
for
made the
saying-
mistakes, so you don't have to.
Yeah, exactly. Now let's talk about expired domains. So that is an interesting one. Expired domains, like you're rarely going to find something that has a great link profile and a great branding / angle, etc. Because it's going to be extremely expensive, like prohibitively expensive, to the point where they're like, well, why don't I just pay a link building agency to link build a $10 domain, and that's probably cheaper. And so I would probably follow the same strategy that I mentioned. So if you started a site with a bad domain, but the difference is that expired domains, I tend to like the idea of reviving them on the original domain at the beginning. So Google kind of like brings some life back to the organic traffic, starts ranking them again, etc. Because usually they get no traffic. And I'm talking about like a year and a half, like sometime, like you probably want to run the site for like some time, run it as a normal site, even if the domain is a bit crap. Build a couple links, but if you are buying an expired domain, you already have links. So it's more about building a quality site, putting content regularly, showing Google it's a good site, basically. And later rebrand it. So buy a $10 domain that you will rebrand to, move the whole site to that new domain, wildcard 301 redirect, so that every URL maintains its slug when you 301, and use the new brand that is going to be much better, higher quality, swap your logo, and that's it. So that's one of the cases where I would probably not rebrand at the same time as I change the design, because you probably need a design to revive the site. So do it at that point, but do it in mind with maybe you can buy the $10 domain at the same time as you buy the expired domain, and you do the branding so that they can fit well together. So that's how you handle expired domains. They're a good idea. You can rank really significantly faster buying expired domains. I have videos on YouTube talking about how to find them, what to look for them, etc. So I'm not gonna go over that. We're just gonna put a card probably this way. I don't know. You choose. And you guys can check about that. But yeah, you will rarely find expired domains with good branding, and you will need to deal with it, pretty much. You want to say something? Okay, sorry, you were raising your hand in a weird way. I think you were showing the card as well. Anyway,
I was just trying to figure out which side it was. If it was like invert. I think it's your left is the YouTube's right. So yeah,
okay.
It's
confusing. It's like because I'm doing it the same way I see it on the screen, but it's kind of like the opposite. Never mind. Any final words of wisdom?
No.
Okay, well, that is how we pick domain names. Thank you for listening, guys. We will see you in 2 weeks for another episode of the podcast. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe, like, bell, comments, everything. We check it all. So thank you very much, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Bye.